The massive crystal chamber gleamed under the artificial lights as Ambassador Jiwon Kim walked through the entrance. Her black uniform was perfectly pressed, and her face showed no emotion as she moved toward the center of the room. Around her, 12 different alien species sat in a perfect circle, their eyes focused on her every step. The air felt heavy with tension. Jiwon had been expecting this meeting for months. The whispers in the galactic corridors had grown louder, and the cold treatment from other ambassadors had become more obvious. Now she knew why. Minho Park, her military advisor, walked beside her. His hand rested casually near his weapon, though he knew it would be useless here. The Council had weapons that could destroy entire planets. But sometimes showing strength was more important than having it. The Vorthak representative rose first. Its purple skin glistened with moisture, and its 6 tentacles moved like angry snakes. When it spoke, its voice came through a translator that made it sound mechanical and cold. "Human ambassador," it said, spitting out the words like they tasted bad. "Your people have become a problem." Jiwon stopped in the exact center of the chamber. She had practiced this moment many times. Her feet were shoulder-width apart, her hands clasped behind her back. She looked directly at the Vorthak without blinking. "Please continue," she said quietly. The tentacles writhed faster. "Your species grows too quickly. You build colonies without asking permission. You create weapons without telling us. You act like you own the galaxy." A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Krell representative, a being that looked like a walking tree, creaked as it nodded. The Nexary counselor, ancient and wrinkled, wheezed through the breathing mask that covered half its face. "We have watched humanity for 50 years, the Nexary said in a voice like dried leaves. "At first, you seemed humble. Grateful for our guidance. But power has made you arrogant." Jiwon listened without moving. She had heard these complaints before in private meetings. The other species feared humanity's growth. They feared human creativity and determination. Most of all, they feared becoming irrelevant. The Zeltharai representative stood next. Its crystal-like body caught the light and threw rainbows across the walls. "The outer colonies must be surrendered," it announced. "Kepler 442b, Proxima Centauri C, and 15 other worlds. These systems are too close to our borders." "Furthermore," added the Vorthak, "all human technology development must be supervised by Council experts. No more secret research. No more hidden weapons programs." The demands kept coming. Human ships could only travel on approved routes. Human trade agreements needed Council approval. Human military forces would be limited to defensive operations within the Sol system. And finally, the Nexary wheezed, "Permanent Council oversight will be established on Earth itself. Our advisors will guide your leaders in all important decisions." The chamber fell silent. Jiwon could feel the weight of their stares. These beings had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years before humans had even discovered fire. They controlled trade routes, shared advanced technology, and maintained peace between hundreds of species. But they also feared change. They feared the energy and unpredictability that humans brought to everything they touched. They wanted humanity to become just another quiet, obedient member species. Minho shifted slightly beside her. She knew he was thinking about the military implications. Earth's defenses were strong, but not strong enough to fight the entire galaxy. If humanity refused these demands, they would face total isolation. No trade, no technology sharing, no allies. "You have one standard day to decide," the Vorthak continued. "Accept our terms and remain part of galactic civilization. Refuse, and face the consequences alone." The other council members nodded gravely. They believed they had cornered humanity perfectly. Accept their control, or be cut off from the galaxy forever. It seemed like an impossible choice. Jiwon took a slow breath. She thought about Earth, about the billions of people who trusted her to represent them. She thought about the human colonies spreading across dozens of worlds, full of people building new lives among the stars. She thought about human scientists making breakthrough discoveries, human artists creating beauty that aliens couldn't understand, human explorers pushing into unknown regions of space. Then she thought about her grandfather, who had fought in the last great war on Earth. He had told her something when she was young: "Sometimes the most important word you can say is no." Jiwon stepped forward. Her boot heels clicked against the crystal floor, and the sound echoed through the silent chamber. She looked around the circle slowly, meeting the eyes or optical senses of each council member. "We respectfully decline," she said clearly. The reaction was immediate. Shocked gasps came from several species. The Vorthak's tentacles froze in mid-motion. The ancient Nexari leaned forward as if they hadn't heard correctly. You cannot be serious, the crystal Zeltharai said, its voice rising to a high pitch. You would choose exile over cooperation. Jiwon reached for her communicator without answering the question. She pressed a button and spoke into the device. Captain Hyun, this is Ambassador Kim. Begin Operation Exodus immediately. All human assets are to evacuate Council space within 72 hours. The chamber erupted in noise. Several alien species began talking at once, their translators creating a confusing mix of mechanical voices. But Jiwon ignored them all. She turned toward the exit, and Minho fell into step beside her. As they walked away from the council chamber, the aliens behind them gradually fell silent. They had expected humanity to beg, to negotiate, to compromise. Instead, humans had simply walked away. Dr. Yoonji Lee looked out through the medical station's large windows at the blue and green planet below. Kithra Prime had been her home for 8 years. She had built the best medical facility in this sector of the galaxy, treating patients that other doctors had given up on. Now she was packing it all up. Doctor, the genetic samples are secured, called Nurse Jinwoo from across the laboratory. He was carefully placing vials of experimental treatments into protective containers. Each vial represented months of research and hope for desperate patients. Yoonji nodded and continued downloading patient files onto portable storage devices. The Kytherian government had requested copies of all medical records, but she knew they wouldn't understand most of the treatments. Human medical techniques were too advanced for the local doctors to replicate. What about the patients in the critical care ward? Asked Dr. Sunyo, her assistant. Some of them won't survive without our treatments. Yoonji paused her work. In the hospital wings below, dozens of alien patients were receiving care that no one else in the galaxy could provide. A young Kytherian with a rare genetic disorder. An elderly Vorthak whose organs were failing. A Nexari child born with defects that human gene therapy could fix. We'll train the local staff as much as possible, she said quietly. But we have our orders. Across the station, engineer Taiho Choi was shutting down systems that had run perfectly for years. The medical equipment was incredibly complex, requiring constant adjustments and maintenance. The Kytherian engineers watching him had confident expressions, but Taiho could see the worry in their eyes. This machine controls the atmospheric mixture in the surgical suites, Taiho explained to the lead Kytherian engineer. It needs to be recalibrated every 6 hours, and the filters must be changed weekly. The alien engineer waved a dismissive hand. We understand basic machinery, human. We built the station's original systems. Taiho wanted to explain that human modifications had improved efficiency by 300%, but he kept quiet. The Kytherians would learn soon enough. Meanwhile, on the industrial world of Vorthak 7, Supervisor Yunahan stood in the control room of the massive mining facility. Through the thick windows, she could see the enormous extraction machines that had pulled rare minerals from the planet's core for 30 years. The machines were her design, built with human engineering and maintained by human workers. The local Vorthak supervisor, a being called Grex, stood beside her with obvious impatience. Its purple skin was darker than usual, which Yuna had learned meant it was annoyed. The extraction rate has increased by 400% since we took over operations, Yuna said, pointing to charts on the wall. But the machinery is delicate. If you skip maintenance cycles, the whole system could collapse. Grex's tentacles writhed. Your people act like we are children. We controlled these mines long before humans arrived in our space. At 1/10 the current output, Yuna replied calmly. She pulled up the historical data on her tablet. Before human involvement, you extracted maybe 1,000 tons per month. Now you're pulling 4,000 tons weekly. We will adapt, Grex said firmly. Our engineers are perfectly capable. Yuna looked at the Vorthak engineers clustered around the main control panel. They were poking at buttons and studying displays with confused expressions. The human modifications had turned a simple mining operation into a complex network of interconnected systems. The temperature sensors must be checked every 4 hours, Yuna continued, trying to help despite Grex's attitude. If the core temperature rises above 700 degrees, you need to. Enough. Grex interrupted. We do not need human lectures. Take your people and leave. On the command ship floating in space above Vorthak 7, Admiral Seokjin-O watched the evacuation with mixed feelings. His fleet consisted of 300 vessels of various sizes. Military cruisers escorted cargo ships filled with equipment and civilian transports carrying human families. Sir, we're receiving another transmission from the Zeltharian Council, reported Communications Officer Da-Hyun Seo. They are asking us to reconsider leaving their mining operations. Seokjin looked at the main display screen, which showed human assets across the galaxy. Medical stations, research facilities, mining operations, trade centers, and diplomatic outposts. All of them were shutting down and preparing to leave. What's their offer? Seokjin asked. They are willing to give us a permanent seat on their local governing council, Da-Hyun replied. Full voting rights and significant autonomy. It was a generous offer. The Zeltharians were known for being extremely protective of their political systems. But Seokjin shook his head. Declined. Send them our standard response. The standard response was polite but firm. Humanity would honor the Galactic Council's decision completely. No exceptions, no special arrangements, no private deals. Admiral, called Lieutenant Kyungsu from the navigation station. The Nexari homeworld is requesting emergency medical support. They have a plague outbreak, and their hospitals can't handle the patient load. Seokjin felt a pang of sympathy. Nexari biology was complex, and human doctors had spent decades learning how to treat their diseases. Without human medical knowledge, a simple plague could kill millions. Sir? Da-Hyun asked quietly. Should I respond to the Nexari? Seokjin watched the tactical display as more human ships joined the exodus. The withdrawal was proceeding perfectly. No delays, no complications, no resistance from local authorities. The Galactic Council had expected humanity to beg, to negotiate, to find ways around their ultimatum. Instead, humans were simply leaving. Completely and permanently. Negative response to all requests, Seokjin said finally. The Council made their choice. We're simply honoring their decision. As the fleet moved toward the Galactic Rim, Seokjin wondered if the aliens understood what they were losing. Probably not yet. But they would learn soon enough. Counselor Vrex stared at the red warning lights flashing across his control room. 3 months ago, he had been celebrating humanity's departure from Zeltharian space. Now he was facing the worst mining crisis in his species' history. Report, he ordered his chief engineer, trying to keep the panic out of his voice. Engineer Thos, a tall Zeltharian with silver-scaled skin, looked at his datapad with confusion. The extraction systems on Zelthra 4 have completely shut down. The main drill assembly seized up this morning. When we tried to restart it, 3 secondary systems failed. What about the other mining worlds? Similar problems everywhere, sir. Zelthra 2 lost power to the entire facility. Zelthra 7's atmospheric processes are producing toxic gases instead of breathable air. And the worst part. Thos paused nervously. We can't figure out how to fix any of it. Vrex's tail thrashed with frustration. The Zeltharian economy depended on those mining operations. Without them, his people would face food shortages within 6 months. The humans must have left technical manuals, Vrex said. Find them. Study them. Fix the machines. But when his engineers brought him the human documentation, Vrex realized the problem was much worse than he had imagined. The technical manuals were written in human language, but even when translated, they made no sense. Look at this, Thos said, pointing at a diagram on his screen. This shows the main extractor connected to 47 different subsystems. Temperature controls, pressure regulators, mineral sorters, waste processors, everything is linked together. Vrex studied the diagram. It looked like a spider web of connections and dependencies. So fix each system one at a time. We tried that, sir. When we repaired the temperature controls, it caused the pressure regulators to malfunction. When we fixed those, the mineral sorters broke down. Every system depends on every other system in ways we never understood. The truth was becoming clear. The humans hadn't just maintained the mining equipment. They had completely rebuilt it, creating integrated systems that were far more efficient but also far more complex than anything the Zeltharians could understand. Meanwhile, on Kithra Prime, Medical Director Zilla faced her own crisis. The hospital's critical care ward was filled with dying patients, and there was nothing she could do to save them. Doctor, the young Kytherian in room 7 is getting worse, reported Nurse Kellen. His genetic markers are deteriorating rapidly. Zilla rushed to the patient's bedside. The child had been one of Dr. Yoonji Lee's success stories. A rare genetic disorder should have killed him within weeks of birth, but human gene therapy had kept him healthy for 3 years. Now, without constant adjustments to his treatment, his body was starting to fail. What was his last therapy session? Zilla asked. Kellen checked the medical records. Dr. Lee modified his genetic treatment every morning based on daily blood work. She would analyze his cellular response and adjust the therapy accordingly. Zilla looked at the complex equations in the human medical files. The treatment wasn't a simple medicine that could be administered the same way every day. It was a constantly evolving therapy that required deep understanding of human genetic techniques. Can we continue the same treatment Dr. Lee was using? We've tried, Doctor. But without the daily modifications, the therapy is actually making him sicker. Similar scenes were playing out throughout the hospital. An elderly Vorthak whose human-designed organ replacement was rejecting. A Nexary child whose human-corrected birth defects were returning. Dozens of patients who had depended on treatments that no local doctor could replicate. But the worst crisis was discovered by High Admiral Corvin of the Council Defense Force. He was reviewing routine security reports when he noticed an alarming pattern. These raids are increasing, he told his aide, Commander Velk. Pirates from dark space are attacking colonies that should be protected by our defense grid. Velk pulled up the galactic defense status on his screen. Sir, we're showing multiple system failures across the outer rim. Sensor arrays going offline, automated defense stations not responding, communication relays malfunctioning. Corvin frowned. The galactic defense grid was ancient technology, built by the founding species of the Council thousands of years ago. It had protected the galaxy's inhabited worlds from external threats for millennia. When did these failures start? About 2 months ago, sir. Right around the time. Velk paused, his expression changing. Right around the time the humans left. A cold feeling spread through Corvin's chest. Pull up the maintenance records for the defense grid. Who has been working on those systems? Velk's fingers moved quickly across his control panel. After a few minutes, his face turned pale. Sir, according to these records, humans have been performing maintenance on the defense grid for 40 years. They were classified as routine technical support contractors. Technical support. Corvin's voice rose. They were just fixing broken equipment. That's what the records say, sir. But. Velk highlighted several entries on his screen. Look at these upgrade reports. Enhanced sensor range, improved targeting systems, faster response times. The humans weren't just maintaining the grid. They were constantly improving it. Corvin realized the horrible truth. The ancient defense grid had been obsolete for decades. Only human improvements had kept it functional. Now, without human maintenance and upgrades, the system was failing completely. How long before total grid failure? Corvin asked quietly. At the current rate of deterioration? Maybe 6 months, sir. As if to emphasize the point, an alarm sounded in the command center. Another pirate raid had penetrated the weakening defenses. This time, they had attacked a civilian colony. Corvin stared at the tactical display showing the galaxy's crumbling defenses. The humans hadn't just been participants in galactic civilization. They had become its foundation. And now that foundation was collapsing. Governor Thex looked out from his office window at the burning buildings in the distance. Smoke rose from at least 6 different districts of the Nexary capital city. The riots had been going on for 3 days now, and his security forces were barely keeping control. His aide, Councillor Wren, entered the room with another grim report. Sir, the food distribution centers in sectors 12 and 15 have been completely looted. The agricultural stations are still producing only 30% of normal output. Thex rubbed his tired eyes. The Nexary homeworld had once been the most prosperous planet in the galaxy. Their advanced farming techniques fed dozens of worlds. But those farming techniques had been developed with human help over the past 20 years. What about our scientists? Thex asked. Have they made any progress understanding the human agricultural systems? Wren shook his head sadly. They're completely baffled, sir. The humans didn't just improve our crops. They redesigned our entire farming process. The soil treatments, the genetic modifications, the harvesting schedules, everything is connected in ways our people never learned. Through his window, Thex could see another crowd gathering in the main square. The Nexary people were hungry and angry, and they blamed their government for driving away the humans who had made their lives so much better. Sir, Wren said quietly, perhaps it's time to contact the humans directly. We could offer them generous terms to return. Thex nodded grimly. Pride was a luxury his starving people could no longer afford. 3 weeks later, a small Nexary diplomatic ship approached the edge of known space. The ship's captain, Zelm, had been given strict instructions to keep the mission secret. If the Galactic Council discovered that individual worlds were trying to negotiate with humanity, there would be severe consequences. But as their ship entered the Outer Rim territories, Captain Zelm and his diplomatic team saw something that left them speechless. "Sir," called his navigator, "I'm detecting a massive structure ahead. It's enormous." On the main screen, a space station came into view that was larger than anything in Council space. Gleaming metal towers stretched in all directions, connected by graceful bridges and enclosed gardens. Ships of unfamiliar design moved in and out of dozens of docking bays. "This is New Busan Station," came a voice over their communications system. "State your business, please." "We are a Nexary diplomatic mission," Captain Zelm replied nervously. "We request permission to meet with human authorities. Stand by for escort to Diplomatic Berth 7. As their ship was guided into the station, the Nexary delegates pressed their faces against the windows in amazement. The docking bay was filled with ships they had never seen before. Some were clearly human designs, but others belonged to species they didn't recognize. Colony Administrator Minji Kang met them at the airlock. She was a young human woman with a professional smile and confident bearing. Behind her stood Captain Wonho Jung, whose military uniform displayed rank insignia the Nexary had never seen before. "Welcome to New Busan Station," Minji said politely. "I understand you have a proposal for us." The lead Nexary diplomat, Ambassador Kel, stepped forward eagerly. "Administrator Kang, our worlds are suffering without human expertise. We are prepared to offer substantial compensation for your return." Minji's smile never wavered, but her response was not what they had hoped for. "I appreciate your offer, Ambassador, but I'm afraid we're quite busy. We've established partnerships with 17 different species beyond the galactic edge. Our expansion schedule is fully committed for the next century." Captain Wonho gestured toward a large window. "Perhaps you'd like to see what we've been working on?" The view outside showed a bustling hub of activity. Alien species the Nexary had never encountered worked alongside humans on construction projects and research facilities. The technology visible through the transparent walls was clearly more advanced than anything in Council space. "Who are these people?" Ambassador Kel asked in wonder. "The Corvani from the Andromeda Spiral," Wonho explained, pointing at tall, blue-skinned beings. "Excellent engineers. And those are the Thesh from the outer void regions. They've taught us fascinating things about energy manipulation." "But these species aren't part of the Galactic Council," Kel protested. "How did you even find them?" Minji's smile widened. "When you forced us to leave Council space, we didn't stop exploring. We just explored in different directions. It turns out the galaxy is much larger and more diverse than the Council ever imagined." The tour continued through laboratories where human and alien scientists worked on projects that seemed like magic. Energy shields that could stop any weapon. Faster-than-light communication systems. Ships that could travel between galaxies. "We would be willing to share some of this technology," Ambassador Kel said desperately, "in exchange for help with our agricultural crisis." Minji consulted a tablet. "Our agricultural specialists are currently helping establish farming colonies in the Magellanic Clouds. After that, they are scheduled to work on a terraforming project in the Triangulum Galaxy. I could put you on the waiting list, but it would be at least 50 years." The Nexary delegation left the station in stunned silence. Humanity hadn't just survived their exile. They had thrived beyond the Council's wildest imagination. Meanwhile, back in Council space, Emergency Counselor Zeph was dealing with an even worse crisis. Long-range sensors had detected something approaching from the dark void between galaxies. "It's a fleet," reported his sensor technician. "Massive. At least 1,000 ships, possibly more." Zeph felt his blood turn cold. This was the threat the ancient defense grid had been built to stop. Extragalactic invaders who had tried to enter their galaxy before, only to be turned back by the automated defenses. But now those defenses were failing. "Status of the defense grid?" Zeph asked. 40% of stations are offline, sir. The remaining stations are operating at reduced capacity." Zeph stared at the approaching fleet on his tactical display. In 6 months, they would reach the galaxy's outer colonies. In a year, they would be at the core worlds. He closed his eyes and made the decision that would shatter a millennium of Council pride. "Send a message to the humans," he ordered quietly. "Tell them we need their help." Ambassador Jiwon Kim stood on the bridge of the HSS Incheon, looking at the massive viewscreen that showed the Council's delegation ship approaching. 6 months had passed since she had walked out of the crystal chambers, and now the same aliens who had demanded humanity's submission were coming to beg for help. Their ship is requesting permission to board, reported Communications Officer Da-Hyun from her station. They're asking for an emergency meeting. Jiwon nodded calmly. Grant them permission. Have them escorted to Conference Room 3. Fleet Admiral Jae-won Lim approached her with a tactical report in his hands. The extragalactic fleet is still advancing. Our scouts estimate they'll reach the outer colonies in 4 months. The Council's defense grid is operating at less than 20% capacity. What's our fleet status? Jiwon asked. 200 ships ready for immediate deployment. Another 300 can be here within a week. Jae-won paused, studying her face. Are we really going to help them? After what they did to us? Jiwon looked at the tactical display showing the approaching invasion fleet. Over 1,000 alien ships, each one capable of destroying entire worlds. If they reached Council space unopposed, billions of innocent civilians would die. We're not helping the Council, she said quietly. We're protecting innocent people who had no part in their leaders' decisions. In Conference Room 3, the Council delegates waited nervously. Councillor Vrex of the Zeltharians looked old and tired. His silver scales had lost their shine, and his hands shook as he held his datapad. Beside him sat Councillor Nex of the Vorthak, whose purple skin had turned a sickly grey color. When Jiwon entered the room, all 5 delegates immediately stood and bowed deeply. The sight was shocking. These same beings had once sat in judgment of humanity, looking down on her with contempt and arrogance. Ambassador Kim, Vrex said, his voice cracking with emotion. Thank you for agreeing to see us. Jiwon sat down across from them without returning the bow. What do you want? We made a terrible mistake, Vrex continued. We didn't understand how much our civilization depended on human knowledge and expertise. Our worlds are failing. Our people are dying. And now this invasion fleet. He activated his datapad, and a holographic display showed the massive extragalactic fleet approaching Council space. The ships were enormous, dark vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Our defense grid cannot stop them, admitted Councillor Nex. Without human maintenance and upgrades, the ancient systems are too weak. We estimate that 90% of our population will be killed or enslaved within the first year of occupation. The room fell silent. Jiwon studied the invasion fleet data, noting the enemy's formation and estimated firepower. It was indeed a force that could devastate the entire galaxy. Please, whispered Councillor Zeph, the emergency leader who had authorized the desperate message to humanity. We know we have no right to ask. We know we treated you badly. But billions of innocent people will die if you don't help us. Jiwon stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the human fleet assembled in space around them. The ships were sleek and powerful, equipped with technologies the Council had never imagined. Behind her, she could hear one of the alien delegates quietly weeping. We will defend this galaxy, she said finally, not turning around. But not for you. We do it because it's the right thing to do. Because innocent people deserve protection, even if their leaders are fools. The battle began 3 days later. Captain Sumin Park led the first wave of human fighters as they engaged the extragalactic fleet at the galaxy's edge. Her squadron moved with precision and speed that amazed the Council observers watching from their command ships. Look at their formation, breathed Admiral Corvin, the Council's military leader. They're not following any tactical doctrine we've ever seen. The human ships seemed to dance through space, appearing and disappearing in bursts of light as they used advanced teleportation technology. Their weapons fired beams of pure energy that cut through enemy shields like paper. Engineer Heejin Ko coordinated the technical aspects of the battle from her command ship. She had spent months studying the extragalactic vessels, learning their weaknesses and developing countermeasures. Enemy flagship is losing power, she reported. All squadrons, focus fire on the command structure. The battle was swift and brutal. The extragalactic invaders had expected to face the same weak defenses they had encountered thousands of years ago. Instead, they met human military technology that was centuries ahead of anything in their experience. Within 6 hours, the invasion fleet was completely destroyed. Not a single enemy ship escaped to report back to their home galaxy. As the last enemy vessel exploded in a ball of fire, the Council delegates watched in stunned silence. Their ancient enemy, the threat that had haunted their nightmares for millennia, had been defeated by humanity in less than a day. How is this possible? Councillor Vrex asked in wonder. Admiral Jae-won smiled grimly. When you forced us to leave, we didn't sit around feeling sorry for ourselves. We explored new regions of space, met new species, learned new technologies. While you were trying to maintain the old order, we were building something better. But even as the council delegates celebrated their salvation, they watched with growing despair as human ships began withdrawing their technical support. The communication relays that had coordinated the battle were shut down. The sensor networks that had tracked the enemy fleet were disconnected. "Wait," Counselor Nex called out desperately. "We need to discuss new arrangements. Surely we can work together now." Jiwon looked at him with the same calm expression she had worn in the crystal chambers. "The old relationship is over. We've learned we don't need your approval to thrive among the stars." As the human fleet departed once again, the council delegates realized the full extent of what they had lost. They hadn't just lost humanity's cooperation. They had lost their chance to learn from the species that would define the galaxy's future. The humans were moving on to greater things, leaving their former rulers behind to face an uncertain future alone.